truly appreciate y'all tuning in and working with us to figure out ways we can not only do things today to protect our summer and our opportunity to get out on the river, but how we can protect our river for future generations. I'm Lisa Reineman, your St. John's River Keeper, joined here with Shannon Blankenship, our Advocacy Director. And as she mentioned, put your questions in the chat box. We'll be monitoring those. We'll answer questions afterwards, and then share this with your friend. We'll connect you to our website where you can see the videos that we've already produced and the ones we will be producing. But today we'll go ahead and get started. This is our Being River Friendly portion of the series. Oh, next slide. And this is our third of this series, and we've actually are going to add some new ones, but for now you can find the one, just the overview of algal blooms in the St. John's in our River Rising series. They're already taped, they're online at stjohnsriverkeeper.org. With all the flooding and rainfall that we've had this past week, the River Rising Resiliency one is a lot of information on how that puts us more at risk with more floodwaters and more nutrients coming in. So tune into that one. Future ones we have on June 24th on sewage sludge, and then focusing on the 8th on Free the Ocklawaha, and then 7/28 on Central Florida water initiatives. All of these different things either help our river be more resilient to prevent algal blooms, or it stops pollution at its source. Who we are at St. John's River Keeper, it's our mission to defend the St. John's River and advocate for its protection. And in the way we do that work is we investigate pollution problems, advocate for policy changes, seek solutions, educate the public so we can empower us as citizens to raise awareness and engage and involve each of us so we can have a larger voice and give our river a voice to be the most resilient river for today as well as future generations. So today we'll do a very quick overview of just Algae 101 to understand what it is, what causes it. Shannon's going to launch into river-friendly practices, things we can do every single day to reduce our nutrient pollution footprint, and then more about the whole Don't Feed the Algae campaign on how you can be part of the solution in other ways beyond the other ways to be river-friendly. Next slide. So what is algae? Algae is driven by nutrient pollution. Nutrients they occur naturally in the river, but when they're in excess, nitrogen and excess phosphorus, that fuels these outbreaks. And that's what makes the green slime a toxic hazard. If they were in balance, we wouldn't be seeing these issues. It wouldn't be a problem, but since we have so much pollution, more than the river can handle, when the conditions are right, with sunlight, warmer temperatures like we're starting to see up in the 90s, and you have slow moving water where it sits around, you start seeing this toxic green slime on the surface, like you see in this photograph here. The green algae is not always toxic. It can be very toxic at times. It can sometimes not be. And so a good rule of thumb is to always focus on steering clear. But what do we need to do? We need to stop pollution at its source. We have to make sure we're keeping excess nitrogen and phosphorus out of the river. We need to avoid exposure. We need to protect each other and make sure that everyone that's out enjoying our waters, they know how to protect themselves. And we need to report, test, and monitor. The only way we can get relief from the nutrient pollution is making people understand it, make sure our elected officials know it's out there. So that's why we will ask you to report it to the state. But protecting ourselves, our kids, our pets is of utmost importance. There are multiple health impacts from being exposed to algae. You can digest it, you can inhale it, and when you're exposed to it, not only can you have stomach issues, you can have respiratory issues, you can get skin rashes, but also can have long-term neurological issues and liver problems. So it has short-term impacts, long-term, and so you want to protect animals. There were several pet dog deaths last year that came into contact with scum at the banks, and you don't want to eat fish out of a blue-green algae outbreak. You don't want to fish or expose yourself to that within the area. So with that, we're going to talk about what can each of us do every single day to be river friendly, and I'll turn it over to our advocacy director, Shannon Blankenship.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Thanks for walking us through some of these basics. That way, it allows us to jump right into the heart of today's discussion and our focus, which is being river friendly. So, as we learned from Lisa, algae blooms are caused by excessive nutrients in our waterways, and people are quick to point the finger at agriculture, at golf courses, at storms and flooding, or even our wastewater treatment facilities. Now, while these are all definitely contributing sources, take a look at our landscape. So algae blooms thrive because of the changes that we've made to our landscape. And keep in mind, these homes that you're looking at right here are full. People live and work in these altered landscapes, and we're all contributing right now to nutrient runoff in our waterways. Today's agenda, I'm going to walk through our focus on being river friendly and how you can make changes at the individual level, at the neighborhood level, and at the community level, and that we can all reduce nutrients from reaching our waterways to prevent algae blooms. So I'm going to begin with talking about changes at the individual level. And there are so many ways to be river friendly at home. Most of those ways are going to fall along a spectrum. And I'm going to talk about a spectrum a lot. And that's because with the so many things that you can do, with so many different ways that we can all move along that spectrum and make ourselves a little bit better, we typically are going to fall somewhere within a range. And so on one side of the spectrum, we have a large St. Augustine grass lawn with a lawn care company fertilizer calendar of about 4 times a year, ornamental plants that probably require herbicides to thrive, the use of red cypress mulch, an installed irrigation system, and an HOA that is going to require a year-round green lawn. On the other side of that spectrum, a fully native Florida landscape, older trees providing a canopy on the rooftop, no irrigation or fertilizer, herbicide, pesticide use, a natural driveway with permeable pavers, water capture devices surrounding the property to direct water into rain gardens and a buffer. Most people are going to fall somewhere within this spectrum. And so there are so many things that you can do, but I'm going to focus today within this sort of individual capacity on ways that we can impact our fertilizer use and water conservation. When it comes to fertilizer use, this is also something that we can think about in a spectrum. And on one side, you have no fertilizer at all. On the other side, you have multiple applications of synthetic fertilizer each year. And again, the images of those two different lawns are going to show you where you can fall within this spectrum about your need for fertilizer. Almost every training I've ever been to on being river friendly focuses on the way that we can learn more about fertilizer and use slow release or different products and fertilizer to apply it in the right quantity and at the right times of year. But what I want to focus on today is actually totally backing up and thinking about how we can reduce the need for fertilizer completely in the first place. And the most important, the easiest way that we can go about this is just reducing your footprint of turf. And so that means looking at your individual landscape and asking yourself, hands down, how much turf do I want to have, do I need to have, and then only having that much turf. And then in the remaining part of your landscape, planting native plants. So that right there, hands down, is just the best thing you can do, the easiest thing you can do. These are the kinds of things that people can, think about and start making these decisions to enact them right now. And then additionally, learning more about fertilizers so that you yourself are dictating your needs instead of allowing your lawn care company to decide what you need. This image right here is an image, actually an advertisement from a lawn care company showing their value to a homeowner. so that they can make clear that the treated side of this image is the value of having a lawn care company, whereas the untreated side of this image is you know, what your neighbors are allowing if they're just letting their turf run amok. Fertilizer use, once you've done steps 1 and 2, so you've reduced your turf and you've planted native plants, your need for fertilizer is already greatly reduced. But now there are some additional things that you can do. Number 1, rethinking the weed mentality. If you think about weeds as actually wildflowers and meadows as opposed to weeds in your lawn, then you're really rethinking the value of these really, really important species for our pollinators, for birds and bees, and really just aesthetics. So your lawn, the turf that you have allowed to remain, that you've decided is very important and that you want to have for, you know, the style of lawn and yard that you have. Once you've made that decision, now you can also decide, is a weed a nuisance plant, or is a weed a wildflower in a meadow that you're allowing to be a part of your landscape? The other thing that you can do is thinking about allowing grass clippings to stay on the lawn. And this is something that a lot of people, especially in HOAs, hands down don't do, and almost everyone that has a lawn care company has really never thought about doing. But your grass clippings are actually the natural fertilizer. So if you mow the lawn and you allow the clippings to just fall right back down into that grass, then the next rainstorm is going to allow the nitrogen to be released from those grass clippings, and you've just fertilized your lawn. And you didn't need to apply anything additional. The only thing we're asking you to do is, because that is nitrogen, to make sure those grass clippings stay on your property. And so even if you're not going to allow them to stay on when you mow the lawn, thinking about places on your property that you can use those grass clippings. And then the last thing is to just rethink allowing grass to go brown, because grass does go brown. It goes dormant in the winter, and that's naturally how it does. And so needing year-round green grass is not realistic and would not be keeping with having a river-friendly lawn. So just rethinking that. So if you've done all of these things, you've reduced your turf, you've planted native plants, you're keeping the grass clippings, you're rethinking weeds. If you still feel like after all of that, you need fertilizer and you want to understand a fertilizer regimen that's going to be right for you, then we have fantastic information on our website about slow release and natural fertilizers that can keep pushing you further along that spectrum. At the end of the day, essentially, I think what we're saying is that algae blooms aren't worth it for that year-round green lawn. And I think all of us can do more to bring us closer to this, which is what we want to see. Now, outside of just individual decisions that we can make with our fertilizer, I also just want to spend this time to really focus on water conservation. And water conservation, we need to think about both in retaining on site all of the rain that falls onto our footprint, our lawn, and then also using less water. So even if we reduce the amount of nutrients that we're adding to the system through our fertilizer choices, if we're allowing water to enter our property and it quickly moves off site as runoff, then we're going to be adding nutrients along with the roads and parking lots that will eventually reach our waterways. So ways that we can retain water and prevent runoff, luckily, are going to be very similar to the exact same things that you're going to want to do to reduce the need for fertilizer. And that is, number one, just reduce the amount of turf that you have on your site, reduce the amount of grass. Think about the smallest amount that you need, that you want to have to mow every week in the summer, that you want to have to maintain and keep looking lush. Reduce the turf and then plant native plants in the areas that you don't have turf. But some other things that you can do are again, allow your grass to grow brown in the winter. Allow it to go dormant. It does go dormant, and that's natural. And so if we allow it to do that, we're reducing our need for irrigation. Some other additional things we can do is learn to capture water on site. So thinking about the places that you have impervious, like your roof, like your driveways in your home, and how do we redirect that water from, instead of running off of our property, to trying to maintain it and capture it on site. One really common way that we can do this is by the use of rain barrels. We're actually going to promo more information that you can learn about how to install and capture water through rain barrels later on. But rain barrels as well as rain gardens. And so these are just areas of your lawn that you have sort of built and directed to hold and retain water. And you can use rocks, you can use plants that are really water loving plants, but thinking about how to capture water on site, harvest it there, and reducing your off-site impact. Last, installing water sensors. There is fantastic technology out there right now, like soil meters or timers, that are going to allow you to not be that guy that has a sprinkler come on in the middle of the day when there's a rainstorm. And we see that all the time, and that's because people with an irrigation system installed just aren't doing that work and that maintenance of really trying to learn more about the technology exists that will allow for automatic shutoff if your soil's at capacity, or the time of day to water, and watering only when your lawn actually needs it. Now, the techniques we discussed today for individual changes included fertilizer changes and water conservation. Many of these you can begin today, but others are going to take months or seasons, even years, as individuals attempt to move further along that spectrum of becoming river friendly. In the meantime, something that can really step it up is trying to work at a neighborhood level, especially in your neighborhood associations. I talk a lot about HOAs. Not everyone has a homeowners association. Many live in historic neighborhoods that might have a preservation association. Many live in high-rise condominium or apartment complexes that have a management company, or many just live in neighborhoods where there's a neighborhood association of people concerned about safety, and maybe they have programs and meetings. And so all of these are ways that you can enter into that system and participate in it, so that you can push some more of these principles on within that sort of larger network. And the first thing that's most important is knowing about the Florida Friendly Landscaping Law. I attached a link into today's presentation to a fantastic presentation by the St. Johns River Water Management District that they recently held. It's 2 hours long. It's comprehensive and so informative on the Florida Friendly Landscaping Law and ways that it's applied through HOAs and through the individual level. Essentially, it just says that you cannot be barred from planting Florida friendly native plants as long as they are aesthetically pleasing. Another thing that you can do is actually join your association. And that's going to be the first step. If you're attending this webinar today, then I have a feeling you are wanting to learn more and you're wanting to help. And so you have this information, and how are you going to take it out of your yard? It'd be great if you tell your kids about it, if you tell your parents about it, but joining that association is going to allow you to propel your voice even further forward. Once you've joined that association, now you can advocate for some of these very, very basic Florida friendly and river friendly principles, like the importance of native plants. We've got to get native plants out there. We need them to cover our entire Florida landscape. And the way that we're going to start that is by talking to folks at the neighborhood level about the use of native plants and the importance of native plants. And then further, some of those really big water conservation measures that we talked about today, allowing the grass to go brown, allowing grass clippings to stay on the lawn, they just are not commonly allowed in a lot of HOAs. And that's something that there needs to be someone from within talking about some of these issues in order to get those policies and those practices changed. The next thing that you can do, and these were just some ideas that I came up with, that there are so many things that you can do at the neighborhood level. But one way is actually working with identifying lawn care companies that understand some of these Florida-friendly and river-friendly principles. Things like, do you allow grass clippings to stay on the lawn? Do you apply fertilizer automatically in a preventative way throughout the year, or only when is needed or as required? Are you familiar with slow release fertilizers? Do you follow these practices? Vetting lawn care companies and then creating a guide that you can then distribute to folks in your neighborhood so that they know who to go to if they want to try and be more river friendly. Another idea is a neighborhood yard contest. And so this is something that St. John's Riverkeeper has done for more than a decade. So we already have potential judges and criteria and a great framework, but have a yard award contest where you're promoting your neighbors to want to have a Florida friendly or river friendly yard and lawn, and then recognize them for that so that you can start building up that aesthetic within your neighborhood. You can put in river-friendly landscaping in communal areas. You can partner with your local Florida Native Plant Society chapter to host a native plant sale. I will tell you right now, hands down, if you think that you can go to Lowe's in March or Home Depot in March and be able to build yourself a nice river-friendly and native landscape, it is impossible. The access to native plants is increasingly difficult. They're not available at many of our really easy, common big box stores. And so creating a demand for that, creating a market for that is difficult, and something that Riverkeepers tried to do over the years. So there are some great landscape companies and nurseries where you can get native plants. And if you work with your local Native Plant Society chapter, you can find out those nurseries that you can get those from. You can even just within the neighborhood host your own native plant sale so that every single March, everyone in the neighborhood knows they can go to you at the neighborhood association, get the plants they need in order to start their gardens. You can make a profit off of it yourself. You can have a profit for the vendors, and make sure that everyone knows how to access these plants and get them. And while you're there, you can sell some of these water sensors. Have your local IFAS, county IFAS department come out, talk about the water sensors and how they work, and really make this a neighborhood scale project to take river friendly and all of these great things to reduce algae blooms up to the next level. But for many of you, I know that you rent. You live in an urban landscape, maybe in an apartment complex with a small strip of grass, and you're thinking these are all great things for those people with a big lawn, but they're not right for me. Or maybe you're one of the fantastic people in our watershed that are already doing literally everything that we just talked about. And so thank you for that. But there are things that we can do at the community level. And so if this is you, really thinking about voting for the river. And what that means, St. John's Riverkeeper every 2 years will undergo a survey process for all candidates running for office to ask them what their ideas and beliefs are about the importance of the river and the actions that need to happen in order to have a healthy and clean St. John's River. And so learning about those candidates and discussing the importance of the river is huge, because we know that our political leadership at the state level can do so much to help us prevent this algae bloom. And so voting the right people in office, or just educating those that are in office about the importance of the river to you as a constituent is really important. Another thing at the community level, we've seen many counties, Indian River, Brevard, Orange, Seminole, take strict summertime bans on the use of fertilizer. One of the first things that you'll find out when you learn more about the use of fertilizer is that when you apply fertilizer, it requires an amount of time in order to move down and penetrate the soil in order to be useful for your landscape. And if you have a rainstorm every single day, which almost all counties in Florida do, you never have the chance for fertilizer to adequately provide that function. And so using fertilizer at all in summertime months is extremely dangerous to our waterways. And so a strict summertime ban is something that is important, as well as many other aspects of stronger, stricter fertilizer ordinances and more enforcement on those that can help move us a little bit farther along. And last, water conservation initiatives are great in your home and they're great in your lawn, but thinking about the bigger guys at the utility level, at the regional level, and at the state level. That's really where strong water conservation ethics and values and principles are gonna occur. And so again, that's something that at a community level, water conservation needs to happen. And then last, just because very seasonally this is appropriate right now, if you're a boater and you're out on the water, there are important things that you should be doing to be more river friendly. The great place to go to get more information on this is the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's Clean Marinas program. Finding a good clean marina and making sure your boat is docked at a clean marina that has gone through the certification process on that is really important. As well as just knowing as a boater the things that you can do to make sure that when you're out on the water and you're enjoying the water, that you're not having, that you're not impacting the river negatively, because you don't want to impact the river negatively. So learn more about that on the Florida DEP's website. And we have a section on this, of course, on stjohnsriverkeeper.org as well. And last, when it comes to hurricane prep, you can find out more about what you should buy, how you should be informed, what you need to have on hand from FEMA and from your state and county hurricane prep resources. But think too about the fact that everything in your yard that is unsecured, when a hurricane force wind, storm surge, and rains come, that's all going to the river. So hurricane prep this time of year, thinking about what is untethered in your yard, and that includes, you know, your chemicals and fertilizers and anything that you wouldn't want reaching our waterways. Think about your hurricane prep and considering the potential impact to the river in that as well. With that, I want to ask you to just visit our website, stjohnsriverkeeper.org, because we have an entire section devoted to even more information about how you can be river friendly when it comes to your landscaping decisions, home energy use, even product recommendations. And all of these things will protect our river from algae blooms, protect wildlife from the impact of those chemicals. But with that, I want to turn it back over to Lisa, who is going to tell us more about what we're seeing right now with algae this summer.
Thank you, Shannon. That was great. And thank all of you for the active chats. That ongoing dialogue in the chat room is wonderful as well, and appreciate your participation. And so some of the keys, just to go back over, and sorry, can you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
Is you need to, we need to know what you're looking for, know what to see when you see green slime. Sometimes there's other green, aquatic vegetation growing that may not be algae, but if you see that bright green slime, recognize it or send us pictures. We'll be happy to identify it for you. Avoid it. Most importantly, protect yourself and report it. We have to get these things on the map because that gives us a stronger voice, working with the Blue-Green Algae Task Force, working with elected officials. Next slide. And we are receiving reports throughout the watershed. This is one in Plumbers Cove, south of Jacksonville area, in Sanford. We also have active reports in Mandarin and down in the Stick Marsh and the Upper Basin. So there are active reports out there of active outbreaks. And with all the rain that we've had, we believe we will be seeing more. While heavy rains will flush out some of the nutrients that are in the river, it also flushes a lot of nutrients in. And we've had heavy rain, which we need over the last couple of weeks throughout the watershed, but that means we're going to see more nutrient pollution. And like I mentioned earlier, with the 90-degree heat, prove him up there, we're going to see more of these outbreaks. Next slide. This is the FDEP, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection dashboard. If you haven't been to this, there's a link on our website, or you can Google it. And it's a fantastic report because it shows you not only where they're investigating these issues, all of these little dots, you can click on them, and they also give you the lab results. So if they took samples like Crescent Lake, there's an active bloom, it tested positive for microcystin, which is a very dangerous toxin. And so we have that information. This provides it at their footprints. This past, we're seeing there are 86 reports in the last 90 days. That jumped up from 63 reports. So again, the conditions, the season is right. And when you go to this, not only can you report things that you observe, you can also sign up for a weekly report, and they send you a summary of what's going on. But more importantly, if we have these outbreaks, we have to get these dots on the map. If we're seeing them and we're not reporting them, then we can't get their attention. So that's critical. And the districts will go out and report on an ongoing basis. So here's how you report. There's a phone number, or you can actually click onto this site that will take you directly to it, where you can do it all electronically. If for some reason you don't want to report it yourself, we can do it for you, but it's better if it's coming from multiple citizens. The more they hear from, the better. However, we do ask you to email them to Shannon so we can keep an eye on what you're reporting. There have been some reports that have gone to the state that didn't trigger testing, and that's critical that it triggers that testing. Also, we have testers that we'll talk about in a minute that can go out to some of these locations. But we want photographs, you want dates, the time, location, and your contact information to be provided, and we'll help make sure that these things will get noticed. Next slide. As I mentioned, we do have water testers. Megan, our volunteer coordinator, has trained testers in multiple places through the watershed. We have a gentleman down in Lake Washington, that southern spot. He actually exposed the big algae bloom last year that was threatening Melbourne's water supply, and helped us get some attention from elected officials in that area, especially in regards to the sewage sludge threat, which has high levels of phosphorus runoff that's fueling these outbreaks. We have a tester in the Black area, DeLand, and Orange Park, and up in Jacksonville and St. Johns County. If you're interested in knowing more, you can email Megan to find out more about this program. Next slide. Also, you may have been, if you've been reading the chat room, you've seen some wonderful comments from Gabby. Gabby runs our DeLand office, our Middle Basin office. She's also doing a River Friendly at Home series. She does an update webcast every Friday that's taped, and then it's shared with you all. This time it's going to be actually on building rain barrels. And so we're very excited. Not only has Gabby worked with us, she's a Florida Master Gardener. And so we appreciate all of her advice that she shared with on our chat group today, as well as this series is fantastic. She did bee boxes last week, and there's more to come. And of course, all the work we do is based on citizen advocacy. We are a volunteer, citizen-driven organization. We don't accept government dollars because it's our job to hold the government accountable. So if you're not a member, we'd love for you to join St. John's Riverkeeper to help us keep this advocacy work going, and for you to join our team. And we also have wonderful merchandise. And so the hat that I'm wearing today, we sell on our website. And we also have a wonderful Don't Feed the Algae shirt, which is a great conversation starter. So if you're active with your HOA, wearing this shirt can get the conversation started or wherever you go. But all of this is available at stjohnsriverkeeper.org, and more merchandise for your pleasure. And of course, join us again. I have been in our Headwaters Advisory Council. This is a group of our members down in Brevard County, have been working on preventing the sewage sludge for adding fuel to this algae problem we have. This is the newest source of large amounts of nutrient pollution in the St. Johns River. And the sad thing about it, it's actually a permitted source by the state. And so we'll have our next webcast on June 24th will be all about sewage sludge and how you can engage in that conversation. But with that, I will open up the floor to questions and the conversation from the chat room. I'll turn it back over to Shannon to get that started. Thank you all for joining us, and I really appreciate y'all's feedback.
Yeah, thanks to everyone. Before anyone opens up, we did have a question that was submitted before, and Lisa, maybe you can answer this. We had someone that during the recent rains noticed oil slicks moving from our roads to the storm drains, and then, you know, we're visibly seeing them in the river. And just wondering, is there any way to prevent that? You know, how do we prevent some of these, you know, chemicals and things from reaching our waterways?
Yeah, well, you know, one easy tip is making sure your vehicle is properly maintained. You know, make sure that your own vehicle is not, you know, dripping oil or anything into the curb and gutter, because unfortunately anything going into the curb and gutter, especially with heavy rains, is racing out to the river. And so that's an easy one, river friendly tip to do. And then if you see any sort of construction work or any sort of things where they don't have the storm drains blocked, we have a major issue, and this isn't oil related, but we're seeing a major issue with the big construction site here off the Ortega River in Jacksonville, where they don't have the proper best management practices to keep all the materials on site. So if you see construction sites on roadways and things like that, that they don't have hay bales or the proper things to keep things out of the storm drain, that's another way to prevent unintended pollution going into the river. But again, if you see a sheen, you know, that's something else that you report. There is a state watch hotline. It's an 800 number you can call if you see any sort of sheen or shine on the river. That can be reported. But it is hard for the agencies to go out and sometimes find them because it is a moving target. So again, back to whenever you report these things, you have information on the location. We have a new app that we're working on called Water Reporter, where you can actually report from your phone and put the coordinates of where these locations are. And we'll be activating that more holistically soon to give you another tool to report these threats.
Another question that we had was about a resource to understand more about weeds. And Lisa, I know that I was really only able to glance, you know, over that topic, but there's so much to even the word weeds, right? And so maybe you could just give a little bit of background on the importance of these native plants in our landscape and how people can learn more about, you know, having them be a healthy part of our lawns.
Sure, and Gabby actually put some resources on our chat about you know, the University of Florida, their IFAS, they have lots of wonderful tools, and we have some links to those tools on our website, and books that talk about, you know, different wildflowers, as I like to call them, that are not only helpful, they're not only river friendly, but they also help our pollinators. You know, they help, you know, you'll see more butterflies, you see more bees in your yard that are healthy, and hummingbirds. So, I mean, it's really important. There are some wildflowers that are in the wintertime, some in the summertime. And something I just learned today, that dollar weeds, basically if you're over watering your yards, you see more dollar weeds. So by watering your yard properly, you could actually reduce some of the weeds that you don't want, but promote some of the meadow-like wildflowers that we desperately need to protect our pollinators and to be river friendly.
The last question is about the grass clippings. You know, I mentioned that grass clippings are a great form of natural fertilizer if we keep them on site, but we see very often grass clippings reaching our roads. And so can you talk about that and what we're supposed to do or some of the requirements around the maintenance of grass clippings?
Yeah, so you're not supposed to put grass clippings down the drain. And David had mentioned he uses a mulching lawnmower that actually helps grind them up and keep them on your yard because it's free fertilizer. You know, it's actually, you know, free fertilizer for your yard. It keeps it out of the curb. But all too often we see even grass lawn companies blowing them into the street, blowing them down the drain. And that's really a double whammy for nutrient pollution in our river, because not only do you have these grasses that have fertilizer on them, but then you get them into the storm drain, into the ponds, and they're breaking down, just adding more fuel to the fire. And so you can report lawn companies if you see them, you know, blowing grass clippings down the drain. Send us pictures too, because those type of pictures of the lawn companies who say they're doing everything right, that helps us when we're advocating for stronger protections and policies through our government. It's when we can show people, doing the wrong thing. We had a photograph of a lawn company that was putting fertilizer out during the rain, which you're not supposed to do. And that picture was worth 1,000 emails to our elected officials because they can't argue with a photograph. Same thing with the algal blooms. We had a big fight with the fertilizer companies 2 years ago, and we had a huge outbreak in April, and we were able to get photographs, send them to senators on the floor, and they put them on the big screen as they were debating fertilizer ordinance. So these things that feel really small, like taking a picture and sending it in, it can truly turn the tide on some of these efforts to get these statewide protections.
Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and for participating. Hopefully you'll join us on our next webinar. And with that, I'm going to end the recording. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.